Hey everybody, it's Chris, and I have a story I've been dying to talk about for months now, and I've been keeping my mouth shut because I had to, but I can talk about it now. So, in the beginning of April, I got a message that the co-lead designer of 5th edition was interested in working with me on a project, which obviously was exciting for me. And this is someone I had never met, so I'm just going to introduce right now Mike Merles. Welcome to Tree Amongst Temple.
Thanks. Hey, thanks for having me. And it's funny because for me, it was kind of the opposite. It's like having someone who has like the system expertise you have, like as a designer. I was like, oh man, I hope he has the time because it's gonna make this so much easier to have someone with that expertise to come in and look at our mechanics. So yeah, I'm glad we're able to work together. I'm super excited.
Great. So, for viewers who don't know who you are, if you could tell us,
Yeah.
who are you?
Yeah, so my name's Mike Merles. I've been working in role-playing games since the late 90s. That makes me very old, but also very hey, I've been doing this for a long time. It's an awesome thing to work on. So I worked on 5th edition. I was the co-lead designer on the game, and I also did a lot of the work around like the business case, like how everything fit together. So kind of like those first few years when you kind of saw the product line come together, a lot of that was me kind of saying, hey, what can we do with D&D to bring things together? I also worked on 4th edition, did the core design of the game, did a bunch of work on 3rd edition, and these days I am at Asmodee working on role playing games there on stuff I can't talk about yet. And then, relevant to what we're about to talk about today, I spent about a year working at Chaosium. I still work with them, so I'm helping them with some projects. And that's where this project comes into play. Maybe you want to do the big reveal. I don't know if people have probably heard about the news yet when this goes live,
No, they have
but
not.
yeah.
Well, some I have told some people about the news recently, but yeah. First, before we say what it is, I want to thank you because I have spent thousands of hours playing 5th edition and loved every second. And I have a career now that's a dream job for me that wouldn't exist without that game. So thank you so much for making it.
No, that makes me
Yeah,
so happy because that's like for me, role playing games are the best games. So seeing like here, like
yeah.
seeing you able to do this, and honestly, like seeing like you with your viewpoint. I mean, that's why I reached out. It's so great now that we have people in the community who can really take the time and effort to really address the game, talk about it in a very technical level that's like super relevant to DMs and players. So thank you for like seizing that opportunity and putting all this work into it to
Well,
to do what you do and this expertise you developed.
well, okay. So now that we've given each other,
I'm just super excited. Yeah.
I will let you tell everyone what's the project we worked on together.
Yeah, so we collaborated on a project called Cthulhu by Torchlight. So Cthulhu by Torchlight says, hey, we have Dungeons and Dragons, world's oldest and greatest fantasy role-playing game, and we have Call of Cthulhu. I don't know if it's the oldest horror role-playing game, but I'd say it's the greatest.
Yeah.
The And so we're combining them. And so what Cthulhu by Torchlight does, I like to think it kind of does two big things. The first is and I think we're going to talk about today, mechanics, giving you character options to play, new subclasses, but also Cthulhu mythos monsters to fight against that DMs can use in their adventures. But I'm also pretty excited about the sort of edge we've given to role playing. This is actually adopted from a Chaosium game called Pendragon, where we are giving you now a role playing hook that players and DMs can use to explain, hey, in a horror game, why would someone go down into the creepy basement? That is clearly a bad idea. Well, the passion system gives you a character role playing trait you can evoke that explains, hey, here's why my character is going into danger. And then you can actually get a mechanical bump from that, a little bit juicier than just getting heroic inspirations, maybe to help you survive the trouble you're about to get into.
Well, I always thought the reason that you separated was so you could cover more ground.
Yeah. Let's split up. So, yeah, exactly. Right. That's the.
The second question I want to ask is, what are the things that are going to be in this book?
Yeah. So the book is basically for players. It has new subclasses. Some of those subclasses introduce new spells that are really specifically aimed at the subclass, and then we also have a selection of new spells that draw on the Cthulhu mythos. And then there are also, if you've played Call of Cthulhu, tomes of forbidden knowledge. Those are essentially the equivalent of like a D&D magic item in Call of Cthulhu. The difference is that a tome of forbidden knowledge can give you really cool abilities and access to spells, but at the cost of your sanity and your grip on reality. And so we model that a bit in the game where there are these like powerful tools you can use against mythos creatures, but they do come at a cost. Now, speaking of those creatures for DMs, the big sort of attraction is you get stats for Cthulhu. So one of the fun things that I think about the game does, and I hope DMs see this, that because we're dealing with like, so if you're not familiar with the Cthulhu mythos, this writer H.P. Lovecraft, about the same time that Conan the Barbarian stories, pulp fantasy was big in the early 20th century. He wrote these stories about this concept of these horrid creatures that just didn't care at all about humanity. Like you humans were just totally irrelevant to the cosmic order that these things occupied. And so the horror comes from realizing that, like, wow, all of human civilization is just irrelevant. These things just do what they do. They destroy humans, they destroy civilizations. They don't even notice, they don't even care. But some people can try to tap into the power these things offer and create cults that are centered around them. So one of the things we're adding is this idea that you can add these creatures to your campaign, and then there are rules for if you played fourth edition, you might be familiar with this concept for skill challenges, which are basically here's how to format a long mechanical challenge that's driven by skill checks. So we give you a framework to add those to your game, and then also adding a lot of advice on how to structure investigations in D&D. So this idea of how to layer your clues, how to bring them all together, how to account for when the players miss a clue, and things like that. So really saying, hey, do you want to run a flavorful adventure that feels like a Cthulhu Mythos adventure? Really focus on investigation and with horror, cosmic horror behind it. You're still playing D&D. You're still heroes. Like you can still go toe to toe with these things. It's just figuring out what their plot is. Can you stop them in time? And focusing on the investigation side for that.
Yeah, I will say. For the viewers, I didn't participate in all the design. I participated heavily in the design of the subclasses and a little bit in the design of the monsters, and including Cthulhu. I would say, don't be jumping to go toe to toe with Cthulhu. That will probably not go well for you. Um, I don't want to spoil too much about the monsters because if you're going to be a player, I don't want you to know too much. But I'll tell you, Cthulhu, probably don't want to fight. Um, but today, what I want to do is for our viewers, we're going to talk just a little bit. We're going to spoil a little bit about the subclasses. So this is the area where I had the most involvement. And basically, the process was Mike had rough copies or rough versions of all the subclasses, and he sent them to me. And I went through them, and I gave some suggestions, and he took those suggestions, and then he revised them, and that gave our final versions. And we have one subclass for each class in the player's handbook. So there's 12 subclasses, and there's a lot to go through, and we're not going to take a lot of time on them today. But if you are interested in them, I am going to have a pinned comment with a link to the project. So if you want to check it out on D&D Beyond, you're going to be able to, select these subclasses when you make your character on D&D Beyond, and it'll put in the mechanics for you. So this is going to be very cool. Yes, I have some of my design included in all these subclasses. I think to some degree. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight all 12, and then I'm going to do another video you're going to see tomorrow. So check that out, where I'm going to give you real text from these features, so you know exactly how they work. Because I think the features that I'm going to be kind of teasing today are pretty exciting, considering that, I mean, since we worked on this, we had an Unearthed Arcana recently, and one of my criticisms of the subclasses we saw is a lot of retread of the same stuff, right? And at the time, Mike and I talked that we want at least something in every subclass that nobody else can do. And I think we achieved that, and so I think these are better than what Voices of the Ghost is doing. But anyway.
So one thing I would say before, and I know, not to turn this into like a mutual, like, but like, I think having your perspective, I think this is something that sometimes people think, optimization stuff, what does it really mean? One of the real advantages of it is like what you talked about, what's out there, what's the metagame essentially for character creation, and then having that insight. To give you kind of a point of comparison, when I worked on Magic the Gathering, there's an entire team of people's entire job was essentially to optimize Magic decks that were in design. to identify both, hey, what's broken? Like that's the obvious thing. But the other side of the coin is to say, hey, in the metagame, we don't have anything that works this way. And that's really exciting. And that's exactly the mark I hope we hit. And I think that was where like your skill set really shone. So
Well, thank you. So let's go through them. We're just
yeah,
going to
let's do
spend a
this.
couple minutes on each one, and I'm just going to do them in order. So we're going to start with the Barbarian and the Path of the Spell Scorned. So tell us about that, Mike.
Yeah, so this one came up. If you played AD&D way back in the day when the Barbarian first showed up, the idea was it was the anti-magic class. It was the class that like didn't use magic, they couldn't use magic items. Back then that was supposed to be a balancing thing, so they end up getting all these extra mechanics, but let's all set that aside. The concept behind this is, and how it ties into this idea of mythos adventuring is, this is a barbarian who has abilities that lets them actively counter magic. So they have a bit of a two elements there. They're pretty good defensively, keeping the rest of the party safe from specifically from magical effects, while also having offensive abilities. Let them really like narrow in. The kind of the iconic moment I was thinking was the evil sorcerer summons the horrid tentacle being. Well, this is the barbarian who jumps in, goes into their rage, and can just take this thing down. They have the ability for that specific type of enemy to really go into overdrive and really handle it. And so yeah, it was kind of thinking. One of the things I also noticed in my own campaigns is the barbarian also often becomes the tank because of rage and getting their damage resistance. So it's something I wanted to play with in the concept was to say, yeah, barbarians often we think, hey, they are like the guided missile and the party really super, DPR focused. But my experience, like in a campaign I ran last year, was the barbarian was captain, like, okay, I rage, jump in the middle of the enemies and draw them all to me because I'm the one who can do this. While and literally the rest of the party was incredibly squishy. It just with the group worked out. But it was so that was really in my mind thinking of my friend Nate's Barbarian, who was just like, oh yeah, you are the only melee character, and you often have six guys around you trying to beat you up, but that's letting everyone else operate. So it was kind of like, well, also played into it too, that my experience as a DM.
All right, and I'm going to tease a feature here, and I'm going to be referring to my notes as I do these. The feature I want to highlight on this one is actually the highest level feature, and I'll be jumping around on levels for subclass to subclass. But the highest level feature is Dimensional Duel. And what it's going to allow, if you guys are familiar with the banishment spell that allows you to banish a creature to a demi-plane, well, this barbarian can essentially do that while raging, except there's a little twist because if they do successfully banish a creature or creatures, they can potentially banish multiples. Those creatures end up in a demi-plane, but they're not incapacitated. But they get a visitor, and that visitor is your barbarian, and they're stuck in the demi-plane with you for the duration of the spell, and then bad things are going to happen to them. Yeah, I think that's a really fun concept. And that one is all Mike. He came up with that one, and I love it. So that is the Barbarian, and hopefully that feature sounds exciting to you as it does to me. Let's move on to the Bard, College of Drama.
Yeah, so the college drama came up. I was looking at what ground bards have covered in the past. And usually when you're designing something like this, you'll start with what has Wizards done. Then you'll kind of take a look, like, hey, what third party stuff has gotten a lot of traction, so you can kind of stay a bit distinct. And I'm surprised I didn't really find anyone doing anything with acting as like, okay, that's the college, the drama. And then I also then kind of thinking back to my gaming group from last year, well, we had a bard who was probably a bit more of a team player and thinking of them as the troop leader, and then thinking, hey, if they're a charismatic person, can we bring in a bard who, rather than just being like, hey, I get into all these hijinks, can I get the entire group into hijinks? Can I eventually, I had this moment, this idea of thinking, hey, the bard wants to disguise themselves as like a mind flayer. Could they get the entire group to do that or whatever it is, right? So it's like, okay, great. Here's the wacky plan the bard has, but it's going to pull all of us along. So the idea being it's not just acting for the bard, but it's thinking of the bard as like, I'm going to put on a play, basically, an elaborate scheme that involves all the other players. What I also hope to do with this, if you're a bard player who's like, hey, I like the role playing, the talky side, this is a way I can bring in players who might otherwise feel a bit like, hey, I'm kind of put to the side because now we're doing role playing. And either because, well, it's just not my thing, or like my character's not built for that. Well, if the bard has this scheme, they can both like, hey, disguise themselves and then use their abilities to also, hey, this is my hench person, right? Like, and incorporate them into the act. So then it feels kind of like in putting on a play. So that's kind of where I came into it, this idea of the bard who gets everyone in trouble rather than just getting themselves in trouble.
And on that theme, I am going to highlight the very first feature that your bard is going to get at level 3 called One Life, Many Roles. So obviously, bards can get Disguise Self and they can cast Disguise Self. What this bard can do is they can cast Disguise Self as a bonus action, seeing a creature, and they take on the appearance of that creature, but also they take on their mannerisms and their voice. And then at higher levels, you can mask the entire party that way. And you even give them a bonus based on your charisma to their charisma checks in order to pass themselves off as whatever they're disguised as. So that's the College of Drama. Let's move on to Cleric and the Apocalypse domain.
So this was a subclass where I was running playtests, and actually that campaign I've talked about was also sort of for playtesting for a lot of these initial concepts. And I knew this one. I think it's going to be popular because every time I've run a game and I've given people the option to take this subclass, someone has always taken it. So the concept here is if you've ever been like to like a big event, like a, like maybe a baseball game or like a concert, there's always someone out there with a placard who's like, "Hey, the end is near, repent," or whatever. This is that cleric. This is the cleric who's like, "Look, the world is going to end. So you guys need to get your act straight." And what I really loved about it is everyone who's played it has really embraced that in one way or another. And so for me, this is the kind of thing where you're thinking of your concept as a cleric. Often, I think we can kind of run into a rut of like clerics are kind of like like these religious people. They do what their God tells them to do. Blah blah blah. This character doesn't necessarily have a god. Like they might think all the gods are wrong. That's why the world's going to end. And so it's been a lot of fun seeing how that plays out. I had in one campaign the player who did this actually as it was set. The game was set in a city, and it was fun watching them essentially start a cult whenever they met people or did anything good. It's like, oh, and remember the world's gonna end, right? Like, and he would go out and between every session, his downtime stuff was always like proselytizing in the streets, and he kept nat 20ing. Like I'd have him make a charisma persuasion check, nat 20, nat 20. Oh god, you have half the city following you now. So, but it added a lot of spice and a lot of fun to the campaign where the players could like burst into a tavern chasing after a thief, and there's like, hey, there's like a 10% chance someone in the tavern is friends with the cleric because he keeps meeting people, and nailing all these checks. So this is one I think is gonna be really fun. Obviously, the tie-in to the Cthulhu mythos is this is a cleric that you might see more of these clerics, and the mythos start getting more and more active.
And they might not be wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so for this one, I'm going to go a little different. I want to highlight a spell. So this is a spell that the Apocalypse domain gets automatically called Doom. And it's a 3rd level spell. And basically you foretell your target's doom. And after you've cast a spell at them, whenever they take damage from an attack after being affected by the spell, you can use your reaction and they take maximum damage from the attack. This would include damage from spells like Chromatic Orb or Smites or Sneak Attacks, and yes, it would maximize damage of critical hits as well. So very, very bad spell to have on you. Okay, so we are going to move on to Druid, Circle of the Symbiote.
Yeah, so this is the one where I was thinking, we often see druids depicted as like these very like, oh, I'm the guardian of nature. I like animals. Yeah, and I thought, okay, what would a creepy druid look like? So the symbiote druid is basically I like nature so much that I am letting plants grow in, on, and in me, right? Like I have this plant growing that's part of me. And I wanted to emphasize this idea of almost like the alien nature of it. Like, you have gone so far into nature and embracing it as something that you worship that, there's often this idea stereotypically, oh, druids don't like civilization. To me, this is like really tries narrative to really hammer that home. Like, no, this druid is forsworn being an animal, right? In some ways, right? Like they are literally becoming one with the forest. And so mechanically, the idea was like you have this vine growing through you, and because it is more like it's almost like a familiar in conceptually, it then can augment what you're doing in play. And so yeah, this one I personally I've always liked this concept, so I was just excited I could get it in, into like a book on D&D Beyond. And so again, think of the Mythos tie-in if you're familiar with Shub Niggurath is one of these entities that has like some ties to nature. And so this idea is, oh, this kind of evokes this idea of nature run wild and like merging like man and nature into one in kind of maybe a creepy, unsettling way.
Yeah, I know. I'm not sure if you saw it, but this reminded me of a movie from the early '80s called Swamp Thing.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
But the feature I want to highlight is a 14th level feature called Surge of Sustenance. Okay, so get this. So sometimes you or your ally is in pretty rough shape. You're in the middle of a fight. Well, this druid can take the magic action, touch them, and poof, they get the benefits of a short rest. And now they only get to do this once for a long rest, but the person who gets that short rest, they can spend their hit dice to heal. They can recover the class features. Fighters who are halfway through that combat, they get their action surges back. Wizards could use their arcane recovery to recover spell slots. Monks who've drained that focus pool could get the whole thing back. So a pretty dramatic effect. And onwards to the fighter and the hero.
Yeah, so the hero was one of the things I've always found interesting about fighters is this idea when you go back to like, D&D's origins and the characters that inspire the fighter, and even going back to his like the chainmail miniatures game that inspired D&D, fighters started off literally being called in that game heroes. And the idea was they were leaders and they were, the inspiring figure. And so that's what I really wanted to tap into, that if you have through the mythos, you have these horrid, impersonal, cosmic threats, well, then what's it mean to defy them? So the idea of the hero being, I am not only a skilled combatant, but I am also a leader. I am someone that inspires others. When I pick up my sword, I give the rousing speech to the villagers, right? Like, hey, everything looks hopeless, but like rally around me, and if we work together, we can get through this is one. And then extending that to the player character group, right? Thinking like, okay, this is kind of like in the classic story, this is the person who takes the lead that we all look up to. Especially like thinking of like the Dragonlance, if you're familiar with those stories, like thinking of someone like Tanis, who was someone that the other characters looked up to, that had this charisma where like when he could inspire others, and so really playing with that and then finding some mechanical ways to make you real like, oh yeah, I am the leader, like I am the one that people are going to look to when the chips are down.
Yeah, and one thing I have commented on this channel in the past is that certainly with the 2024 update, when it comes to fighter subclasses, if you want a fighter that's has also some reliance on a mental stat, it's always intelligence. Well, we finally have one that's not intelligence based. It is charisma based fighter, and right at level 3, you're going to get heroic effort, and at the end of a creature's turn, you get to move and make an attack using your reaction, and you can pick an ally, and they can do the same thing. And your number of uses is based on your charisma, and it continues to be a focus for this subclass as they progress in levels. So I was very glad to see a non-intelligence fighter. Let's move on to the monk and the warrior of cosmic balance.
Yeah, so this was inspired by the idea that if you have like these monastic orders, like whatever it might be that they study, this idea like, hey, maybe there's an order that does focus on like the mythos. Whether they know it's the mythos, they might just, oh, there's these entities we need to watch out for. And I also love the idea of like, oh, the secret society that keeps its eye out for like evil and then can kind of pop up, almost like the Harpers from Forgotten Realms, where tradition to kind of show, oh, they're very secretive. You don't really know who a Harper is. I ran a really fun adventure a couple of years ago with the players. They spent the first half of the campaign just trying to find the Harpers. Like, we need help. We need the Harpers to deal with this, but who can we trust? It was this great, like, web of mystery thing. So yeah, so this idea, this monastic order, they train specifically to like, there's a weird supernatural threat. They go out, investigate, and deal with it. And this is what I am going to share. A few words in the text, because each of these subclasses gets a little flavor text. So this character, Sharisa, Acolyte of the Vast, her little intro text is, when the cosmos spins out of alignment, my job is to kick it back into place, literally. So I'm like, yeah, that's this monk, right? Like, things out of balance. Okay, I'll just go kick it, and now we'll fix everything. So
Yeah. And speaking of kicking things into balance, I'm going to talk a little bit about the 6th level feature on this one, Warden of Harmony. So sometimes, you're trying to lock down an enemy and they just keep teleporting and nothing works. Well, you can block their teleport with your reaction. And then you can use your third level feature, and you can punch them with their flurry of blows, and they can't teleport again until the next round. So you can all those creatures that keep teleporting and they get out of all your web spells and all that stuff. This is the monk that those control casters. They're gonna be their best friend, basically. And onto the Paladin and Oath of the Guardian.
Yeah, so this one was a pretty simple, straightforward design. It's something I've been wanting to put in the game since maybe 2014. It's just I just wanted a very tanky paladin. Like, look, I just want the paladin who's like, I'm here to keep the rest of you alive. Like that's what I do. And again, maybe it's probably part of my just my DMing experience. I mentioned I had the campaign where the Barbarian was the tank. I've seen that happen before, and it just felt like I think if you'd ask people, hey, who would be really good at drawing and managing attacks, I think people would tend to say the paladin. Now, paladins do have some of that, but I wanted to make one that was very explicitly clear that, like, no, if you play this character, you are the one that protects others. There's also one thing I want to talk a little bit about here in the flavor text. We go through and actually break down each of the law, chaos, good, and evil, allow you to build your own tenets. Like, okay, here is my paladin's oath. Like, here's the specifics of it. So I wanted to give players flexibility to say, look, I can play a lawful evil version of this character, and here's why evil might want to protect other people. Well, in this case, it might be, I'll protect you, then you'll rely on me. So now I'm the one who keeps you alive. So I need to get rid of you. I am in perfect position to do that. And so things like that to kind of give you flavor. Hey, so, maybe that gives you a way you could play an evil character in a campaign because you get, oh, here's why I'm doing this. I want the king to be totally beholden to me so one day I can overthrow him, and things like that. So, yeah, this is one which for me was like, I really have been wanting to get this in the game for a while.
It
So,
fills a gap that you saw a long time ago. So, in a more general sense, one thing I've always recently kind of thought in terms of subclass design is one area where I think it's largely untapped is I think there's a lot of possibility for subclasses to take class features or spells that any member of that class can use and use them in a unique way. And this is the first subclass. I have not seen one before that uses weapon mastery in a unique way. So we're going to talk about Marking Strike, which is the third level feature. And now I personally love the idea of the spell Compelled Duel. I do not love the mechanics of the spell Compelled Duel. I just don't think it's that great a spell. But Marking Strike allows your paladin to forgo using their weapon mastery property on any or even all attacks that they make. And when you hit, that creature has disadvantage on attacks against anyone other than you for the next round and has a hard time moving away from you. And it's not going to use your concentration. There's no one creature at a time limit. This is not going to eat up your bonus action. So that is the Oath of the Guardian, and I think that is the replacement that fixes Compelled Duel. Replaces it. All right, the Ranger. Okay, so the Ranger is a contentious topic, and I think we were nice to the Ranger. I think we were generous. So let's talk about the Trail Warden.
yeah, so the Trail Ward, I have thought a lot about the Ranger. So my Ranger lore, personal Ranger lore is I thought that in second edition AD&D, the Ranger was the coolest class because it got all these things that like you otherwise couldn't get and be a weapon using fighter type. Like you got some thief skills, you got some spells. It also this interesting stipulation where you could do two-weapon fighting, which back then was like super punishing. Like if you didn't specialize in two-weapon fighting by taking the right character class, it was like a horrible option. Like you just did not do it. Your character was useless. But the Ranger was really good at it. And so that to me was so fun. And then over the years, those options have basically migrated into the core of the game. Now anyone can fight with two weapons. Anyone can sneak. I think those things are strictly good for the game. But the Rangers kind of lost something. So here's one where I thought to myself, we talk a lot about, okay, Rangers should be on your expedition because they help you survive the wild. And then I thought, well, what if we just kind of expanded that overall to be like, no, the Ranger is the person who helps you just survive, period. Like they're very good at teamwork. They're very good at leading the expedition. They're very good at keeping you out of trouble, giving you, making the group. And I think this is something you might see. It's kind of funny as we're talking through this. I think this might be a through line in the designs where these are really designed to work as a part of a group. Really thinking that these are team players. I think one of the things we did was we tried to avoid giving like the self-solve, like, oh, I just do a thing that can just shut down an entire counter on my own. It's typically like I am setting things up where I need support from other characters. So this is a ranger who basically amplifies their entire group by expanding what the rest of the group can do, helping keep them safe on travel, but also in combat, kind of again, a little bit while the hero's inspiring, this character is probably more tactically cunning and is good at positioning people and helping you get out of trouble in a fight.
So my view on the ranger mechanically is that in the 2024 rules and possibly even in earlier in the fifth edition rules, rangers were fine at low level, but it's as the levels progress is where the trouble started to occur. I was looking at specifically those above fifth level features to make sure that we had some goodies for people that make Ranger worthwhile. And here's 4 words for you: level 9, Spirit Guardians. Yes, we got a Ranger with Spirit Guardians, and we got a feature that allows you to move your entire party. Or give your entire party the ability to use their reactions, and they can both move without provoking opportunity attacks and hide as part of that reaction. And they get a bonus on that roll. That ties into the protecting the whole party thing. And again, that's a little bit later that they can do all that stuff. But they get some of it at third level. So let's move on to the rogue and the Shadow Stalker.
Yeah, so the flavor behind the Shadow Stalker is kind of leaning into that mythos kind of creepy element of it. This is a rogue who's learning shadow magic. Now, rather than using spell slots, it's driven by a power source that you get independent of that. I think the mechanic is essentially you get one point per level that you can then spend on special abilities that are all themed with shadow magic. And the idea behind this is now this is my I don't know, like me personally expounding. Oh, here's an approach I like to take with fifth ed. One of the things that I feel about rogue subclasses is that they often fall short for me by not really giving you like the equivalent of the fighter's maneuvers for the battle master. And I think that's something like as I've been thinking with the rogue and like stuff I want to do with it, this subclass kind of shows that off. This idea that okay, you are now using shadow magic. You're getting fuel you can now use for this set of essentially daily recharge abilities. They're going to sit on top of what you're otherwise doing as a rogue. And so this with Shadow, the idea is that you have a shadow, like your own shadow has been fused with magic and is split off from you. So you can use it as a scout. It's kind of like your buddy. You can do some like minor teleportation stuff by moving around with it. So I really wanted to create this idea of something that said, the rogue, here is the rogue as the basic chassis, what you could do, skill expert, stealthy, sneak attack. Okay, now, but what's the identity I can now lay on top of that to make what I hope is a really distinctive character to play?
Yeah, and I'm going to continue on with this idea of this shadow that is part of you. I'm going to tell you where it ends up, because at 17th level, you get True Shadow. This is a very powerful ability, but it's the rogue. It deserves a powerful ability. Basically, you can turn your shadow into your duplicate, and you can use it to do things like attack twice on your turn, getting 2 sneak attacks on your turn, and other stuff. But that's kind of the big one. And it's not super easy to get rid of. So I think a very, very powerful 17th level feature. And we move on to the Sorcerer. And the Sorcerer is the Hungering Dark.
Yeah, so this is kind of thematically, it's funny these classes ended up next to each other. But the idea was, okay, can we take a sorcerer who's maybe dealing with kind of like quasi forbidden magic? So this idea of the sorcerer who's using shadow magic, it's combining with their own magic. And so what I wanted to play with is this idea that there's a character who's very at home in darkness. It's a resource they can use, using it to, obviously, create shadows to clog up the battlefield and so on, but also give people like this kind of like really creepy, fun role playing hook of like, oh yeah, you're just someone who's more comfortable in the darkness than in light. The So yeah, and this is the I'm curious to see what mechanic you talk about because this is one where actually one of my players this is a character, a long running character in a campaign I ran, and it was interesting seeing like how the subclass shifted over time. And because one of the things I think we talked about, like in your notes, was this idea like, well, darkness is a double-edged sword for a group, right? Like it can be fun, but it can also like I have played the game where I think it was a warlock using darkness to just basically, okay, everyone else stop playing because I'm the only one who can operate in this environment. So
Yeah, yeah, you hit the nail on the head as to what I'm going to talk about. This was something that I had suggested actually is the idea of subclasses that can create magical darkness and see through them. That's not new, but they always have a pain point. So this subclass at level 6 gets Friends to Darkness, and so it can create magical darkness that it can see through. But the twist here is at level 6 they can choose allies who can also see through the darkness, and that I think removes the main pain point that tables have with this kind of thing is you kind of exclude the other party members. Though I will also hint that another pain point for these kinds of features is at super high levels, every creature has true sight or blind sight. In the monster manual, if you go, I think it's above level CR 20 and higher, 100% of creatures have true sight or blind sight, which regular magical darkness doesn't work. So suddenly you have a subclass that doesn't feel like a subclass anymore. This subclass has ways to address that. And I won't say more than that. The Warlock. Okay, so we have. This one was amusing to me. The Exalted Assembly of the Feline Court.
So if you work with me on any creative project, especially you want to deal with fantasy, I will eventually suggest, hey, how can we let the player become a cat? Because I love cats. The only reason you have not seen a cat bound onto camera right now is we just got a new kitten about a week ago. So I think the cats are still trying to figure out their pecking order. But yeah, so I think you can never go wrong if you let people turn into a cat because people love cats. We also had, I mean, the entry here was Lovecraft was also really loved cats, and in some of his Dreamland stories, he would have cats as essentially the guardians against the mythos, like that there were these ultra intelligent cats that they would kind of like have agents in the world, would keep an eye on things that are happening and help work against the mythos. So this is essentially the warlock equivalent of the warlock who makes a pact with that group of cats. So so yeah, I don't want to spoil the mechanics. 'Cause I don't want to steal your thunder. But like I said earlier, one of my things is if I can give a way for the player to become a cat, I'm gonna seize on that. I'm gonna pounce on that, if you will.
That's not the
So,
feature I'm going to be talking about. So yes, yes, you can turn into a
but yeah,
cat.
and I always like one of the things I like about warlocks is when they are very like super strongly flavored to like live their pact. You know, when it's like, oh yeah, you have a pact of this, and that like really affects your character, both like how your character looks, how they act, and how they see the world. You know, almost like I almost described it as like it's like a more fun version of a cleric domain, where it's like, well, you're not obeying them. It's more like a partnership where sometimes you can disagree, you know, as opposed to just have to follow your patron. So this is when I had to admit I had a lot of fun designing it, and I think there's actually a credit in the product for my cat who often shows up and jumps on my keyboard when I'm trying to work. So I had to give her a credit because the I think without her and her chaos, it wouldn't have been able I wouldn't have been able to design the subclass. So
Yeah, no, I kind of picked this one because I've talked about some high level features, some low level features, some mid low level features. I want to talk about mid high level features. So we've got 9 lives, which of course we have 9 lives at level 10. And I think if you saw this in a standard product, you would see what advantage on death saving throws, right? But here you are going to get 9 lives, which is a resource, and you can use them to do things that are far more interesting. Like, how about if you are at 0 hit points and that enemy comes up and hits you while you're down, you can not suffer death saving throw failures from that. If you are making a death saving throw, you can give yourself a nat 20, so you get the 1 hit point and hop up. You can even, though you need all 9 uses, get hit with a power word kill and shrug it off. Yeah, that's a cool feature, I think, that fits in with the theme of 9 lives. And we are going to finish up with our final subclass, the Wizard and Bibliomancy.
yeah, so this is one where, you know, wizards have been attached to books in D&D for ages, since the very, very beginning. And there's been some attempts like to do kind of like, magic around words and speech and true names, and they've never really landed well with me, because we already have like the power words in the game and everything, and it would be super on flavor to do something with books because the mythos is usually these tomes. So I came across, kind of what I settled on was this idea of like, well, what if you think of it more from the scientific standpoint? Like you're learning magic by reading books, by understanding the laws behind it. So could then that unlock the ability for you to start altering your spells in ways that are kind of fundamental to how they work? Almost like, hey, if you're a physicist and now okay, you understand physics, well, then you can design things based on how objects will interact and how forces work. So this idea was to kind of almost like a scientific wizard, one who is kind of almost like an arcane hacker who can, mess around with their spells and do things that other wizards who maybe don't have that theoretical understanding can do.
Yeah. So this is going to hit home for a couple people who I talked to online who, as the 2024 playtest was working, there was a version of the wizard that could play around with their spells and they could modify them. And they took that away, right? It's gone now. And a lot of people were really upset. Well, this subclass can do it. So at level 14, you're going to get Master of Words. This is only one feature that modifies spells, by the way. This feature allows you to pick two of the spells that you're preparing after a long rest, and you can combine them into a single spell with a spell level equal to the total of both spells, up to 6th level. And when you cast a spell, both spells have to have a casting time of an action. And when you use your action to cast a spell, both spells happen at the same time. So it basically allows you could concentrate on two effects at the same time. Though if you lose concentration, you're going to lose them both. But there's a lot of way to play with spell casting with this subclass. So if you are heartbroken that wizards can't do that anymore, this is going to be a way that you can do that. Okay, so those are all the subclasses, and we did a brief summary here. Tomorrow, I am going to go over specific mechanics on some of this stuff. I obviously can't do everything, but I am going to show you exactly what some of the subclass features do, maybe like the starting point for them, what my contribution was, and where we ended up. But for now, Mike, I just wanted to thank you so much for the opportunity to work with you. It was great. I had a great time. And for the rest of you, this is triple video week because I will be back tomorrow. If you are interested in this product, check the pinned comment in down below. It's got a link. But if you're not sure yet, come back tomorrow and I'm going to show you some exact features and hopefully you get really excited about that. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.